Welcome to Friday's edition of COVID-19. Authorities have decided to extend level 4 restrictions for 2 more weeks here in the Greater Seoul area in light of the rampant daily infections. Elsewhere, Tokyo is raising the curtains on the 2020 Summer Olympics on this Friday, and we have more on that event later on in the program. Here first is our Kwon So-ah with the pandemic updates. Now, So-ah, do start us off then.
Yes, Sunny. Korea is seeing a drop by more than 200 infections on Friday. 1,630 cases were accumulated as of 12 a.m. But we actually have a rise in domestic transmissions here by around 40 cases compared to yesterday because we have a plunge in imported cases. As the day before, we had over 300 imported cases, as many of the new cases linked to a massive cluster infection on a vessel were added to that figure. And that means that the drop here cannot be translated as a positive sign yet. And for the 17th straight day, we have been seeing cases at above 1,000 here in the country. And that raises the total number of infections to above 185,000. Meanwhile, we've got 16.7 million people who've got at least one dose of COVID-19 vaccination.
Right, and so there is growing concern over the virus's presence in non-capital areas, I hear.
Right, Sunny, and we are seeing another rise in the proportion of cases outside the metropolitan region, as you can see here, at close to 36%, while officials do note a slight improvement in the capital region. Take a listen.
The spread of the virus in the capital region appears to be slowing down somewhat, following a recent spike. However, it's difficult to say that we've turned a corner in the outbreak. Still, credit is due to the residents in the capital area for curbing the rising trend by reducing their movements and gatherings.
In fact, according to the official, in the capital region, there's been a decrease in movement by around 8% from the week before in the past week. And outside the capital region, there's been an increase by 4% of movement. But this Thursday, we are seeing rising cases in both the capital region, like Seoul and Gyeonggi province, as well as down south, including in Busan and Daegu as well. Busan now in the triple digits for the third straight day. So as the situation has yet to improve, the government this Friday announced a 2-week extension of the social distancing measures in the capital region that were to expire on Sunday. So that means level 4 in Seoul, Gyeonggi province and Incheon until August 8th for now. Meanwhile, we've got also other places here under level 3 social distancing. So let's take a closer look now. Here we can see, apart from the metropolitan region, we've got Gangneung in Gangwon-do province under the toughest social distancing measures. And under level 3, we've got places in the center of the nation, as well as many places in the southern part of the country. All right, now if we take a look onto a country that's also under tough social distancing measures, Japan recorded almost 5,400 cases on the eve of the Olympic Games opening ceremony. Its capital and host city of the Games, Tokyo, remains under a state of emergency throughout the Games, meaning no spectators at most of the venues. Tokyo posted its highest figure since mid-January. Close to 2,000 infections were reported on Thursday. Japan now has a total of more than 850,000 infections and more than 15,000 deaths, and is the country with the 34th highest amount of cases around the world. And now let's take a look at the 20 countries that have the highest cases around the world. We've got the US with resurgences of over 67,000 infections the past day. Also, the UK is seeing an increase due to the Delta variant, while Indonesia here has hit 3 million infections in the past day with a rise of I will check the number here right now, of more than 49,000 infections. And the total number around the world stands at 193.4 million. Those are the updates I have for now. I'll see you back after the government briefing. Sunny?
All right, so I'll see you back at the desk. Right, let's now take a closer look at the latest decision to maintain level 4 restrictions here in the capital region. I have our Kim Sung-hyun in the studio with me. Welcome, Sung-hyun.
Hello, good afternoon.
So authorities have agreed to keep social distancing at the highest level here in the metropolitan region.
That's correct. So as SOA has emphasized, and as you mentioned, level 4 social distancing measures will certainly remain in effect in the capital region for another 2 weeks, particularly with the fourth wave of the outbreak showing no signs of a let-up at this point. Now, level 4 guidelines, the highest in the 4-tier system of curbs, have been issued in Seoul, the surrounding Gyeonggi-do province, and the western port city of Incheon. Now, they first came into effect on July 12th, and the measures will be extended for another 2 weeks, starting next Monday until August 8th.
In order to curb the recent uptick in cases that is taking place broadly in everyday settings such as crowded venues, we must all refrain from travel and holding private gatherings.
Minister Jun added that the decision was made in light of the continued surge in new cases in the capital area, which account for nearly 70% of the nationwide total. Under level 4 rules, gatherings of 3 or more people are banned after 6 p.m. Rallies are also prohibited, although the government does allow one-person demonstrations. And entertainment venues, including nightclubs, are ordered to shut down, while restaurants are only allowed to have customers dining in until 10 p.m.
Right. Meanwhile, Sung-hyun, how is our healthcare system coping with this latest resurgence?
Well, alarm bells are certainly ringing, Sunny. We do have health authorities here bracing for a possible shortage of hospital beds for COVID-19 patients. Korea has yet to face a shortage of ICU beds for seriously ill patients, but residential treatment centers for patients with mild symptoms are almost full in some regions. The KDCA indicated Thursday afternoon that the occupancy rate of treatment centers nationwide now stood at 64.3%. In response, health authorities have asked local governments to make more beds available for such mild COVID-19 patients.
There are still 8 regions in the country that do not have their own residential treatment centres in their jurisdiction, so we're asking them to quickly have them up and running for the treatment of patients with mild symptoms.
The latest outbreak has had a disproportionate impact on young, unvaccinated people in their 20s and 30s. Also, cases are on the rise in areas outside the capital region, now taking up more than 35% of the nationwide total, partially due to the softer restrictions there.
We're seeing a sharp rise in cases not only in the capital region but also in other areas nationwide. Cluster infections are being reported from a variety of everyday settings, including restaurants, entertainment venues, and workplaces.
In response to a sharp hike in new cases in non-capital areas, authorities have tightened virus curbs to limit gatherings of more than 4 people across the nation, which did go into effect Monday for 2 weeks. Also, despite such challenges, Korea's inoculation drive is continuing to gain traction. So starting next week, vaccinations for people aged between 55 and 59 will begin with the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines.
Right, and staying with vaccines, I hear Moderna shots have been found to be quite effective against variants, Sung-hyun.
Right, so health authorities on Thursday, they were citing a study that was done in Canada, which involved some 420,000 subjects, and said that the Moderna vaccine is quite effective against the Delta, as well as some of the other variants. The study, which has yet to be published, showed that 1 dose of the Moderna vaccine is 72% effective in preventing Delta variant infections, and lowered the rate of deaths and hospitalizations as well by 96%.
We found the Moderna vaccine to be 83% effective against Alpha variant, 77% effective against the Beta and Gamma variants, and 72% effective against the Delta variant after just a single dose.
The welcoming news comes amid rising concerns here in Korea over the highly contagious Delta variant, which accounted for more than 3/4 of all domestic variant cases over the past week.
All right, Sung-hyun, as always, thank you very much for that coverage.
Thank you for having me.
Right, it's time now for the regular afternoon briefing for the COVID-19 situation here in Korea for this Friday. Now, as mentioned earlier, level 4 restrictions here in the Greater Seoul area have been extended for 2 more weeks. The briefing's about to start. We'll come back to you afterwards.
Today we have our briefing to be carried out by Mr. Kwon Junuk. Moreover, we are also joined by Mr. Kim Gi-nam from the Vaccination Task Force. First of all, here is Mr. Kwon Junuk with the explanation. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Kwon Junuk, and let us now begin our regular briefing for July 23rd, Friday. And first of all, on the vaccination front, here are some updates. As for those between the age group of 55 and 59, we have been receiving the booking from the July 12th. And as for the eligible recipients, as of today at midnight, the vaccination booking rate stands at about 82.4%. And those between the ages of 50 and 54 stands at about 78%. And in general, among the 50s, we have the vaccination booking rate standing at 80.9%. And they will be receiving the mRNA vaccine, namely the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. And starting from 26th until 31st, as for those who are in the age group of 55 and 59, in the metropolitan area, they will be receiving the Pfizer vaccine, and Moderna vaccines will be given out in other regions. However, within the capital area as well, as for the hospitals that have been signed up to only provide the Moderna vaccines, there are about 250 of them. They will be giving out Moderna vaccines as scheduled. And as for those who have already completed your booking process, please visit the designated centers and hospitals on the day of reservation. And if you have not yet made your booking, please note that you could do so until the 6 p.m. until of the 24th of July. So please take use of this booking period. Moreover, as for the mRNA platform vaccines, including Pfizer and Moderna, we have some updates on the intervals of the 2 doses. As for Pfizer, the interval is 3 weeks and Moderna is 4 weeks. And nevertheless, as for the screening and advice by our committee, we have been considering many comprehensive measures. And as if needed, we could also have the interval at a maximum range of 6 weeks. We have been talking with the experts, and as for Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, which are mRNA vaccines, as mentioned, it is also to be flexible to have an interval of up to 6 weeks, and this is because of the following reasons. First, in order to enhance and maximize the convenience of recipients as well as those who are administering the shots. So there could be many conditions and many reasons of these recipients and the hospitals. So we would like to make these conditions more flexible. And second, in order to have a smooth facilitation of the vaccine rollout, this is another goal that we have right now. We have a sufficient amount of doses to arrive in the months of July and August. However, we need to also consider the detailed schedule timeline, and we are going to have a more flexible response. Moreover, in other countries, they also have a flexible run of the intervals, and depending on each of the individual countries, they are having up to from 6 weeks to about 16 weeks maximum as for these types of vaccines. So as for those who are receiving their first dose of these vaccines in their 50s, the mRNA vaccine that is, the second dose will be announced. The timeline for the second dose will be announced with the average of 4 weeks. So we are taking into consideration the 4 weeks of Moderna. However, this has been, if this is changed to 3 weeks as recommended by Pfizer, there could be some changes to the entire schedule and the timeline of our government's vaccine rollout. And moreover, if we utilize both Pfizer and Moderna, if there are differences in the vaccine timeline, we believe that it will be difficult to remind individuals of the exact date of their second dose, and this is to reduce further confusions. However, if you have already received the Pfizer vaccines in advance, this means that you will be receiving the second dose within the timeline of 3 weeks. And as for those who are working in the kindergartens as well as primary schools, we ask you to get your second dose after 3 weeks so that we do not have any confusion with the entire time schedule. And we ask for your understanding if you are one of the eligible recipients within the age of 50. Moreover, we have many teenagers who are not enrolled in schools. However, they are preparing for the college entrance exam, and they include those between the ages of 16 to 24. And also, they are the people who will be taking the exam in late this month, and they will be applying for the college 2022. And we will be extending the timeline of the schedule. So if you are willing to get vaccinated, please visit a support center nearby and get yourself vaccinated. And as for these people who are going to take the college entrance exam, they will also be receiving the Pfizer vaccines in mid-August. And next, we also have the committee of the third round of our vaccinations. And as of mid-July, we have been carrying out our analysis of the exact number of vaccinations, and we have had reported some errors in administration of the vaccines, and they include the doses, and also we have been looking at the detailed adverse responses after such errors, and we are taking a pan-government response against these errors, and also against all of the vaccination centers and hospitals that are rolling out their vaccines. We are going to provide them with a checklist to ensure a safe environment for these inoculations, and we will also digitalize our scheme of having the reports of such administration errors of vaccines in order to prevent a further possible outbreak of such errors. And next, we also have some updates in the R&D measures. And we have today the Olympic Games, the Tokyo Olympic Games beginning, and in order to decrease and minimize the number of imported cases, we are also devising special tailored measures and guidelines. And we also have formed a task force to look at the possible influx of cases, and we are going to operate them around the clock. And also, as of earlier July, we have dispatched one of the task force to Japan so that they can look at the Korean athletes who have been traveling to Tokyo to attend the Olympic Games. And also, we are complying with the basic quarantine rules, and we are also asking them to comply with strict quarantine measures when they return back to Korea. And also, during the Paralympic Games as well, we are cooperating closely with the Korean Association of the Disabled, and we are going to also provide necessary assistance to these associations as well. And next, as for the new variant responses, here are some details. And we have seen a surge in the spread of Delta variant, and we have a high increase in our concerns and possible influx of these Delta variants from abroad. And we have been taking a comprehensive view, and in August, we have decided that we have been looking at these high-risk countries around the world, and they amount to about 26 countries around the world. So if any of them coming from these 26 countries have an exemption document for self-quarantine, they will still be subject to isolation once they come to Korea. And we are also conducting our cultivation of the new variants right now here in Korea. And we also have had about more than 700 such of the sample cultivation. And we have an increased proportion of the Delta variant here in Korea. And as for our treatment, the antibody treatment, we have been giving out the vaccine, the treatment to more than 900 people, and also the the therapeutics to over 7,000 patients here in South Korea as well. And we are seeing a spread in the daily cases here in South Korea. And I believe that South Korea is not only subject to such a wide spread of the virus, but all of the international community is also under the spread of these new cases. And as for the countries that have been seeking an ease in the antivirus measures, I believe that they are also witnessing similar measures. And also we are seeing more virus spread among those who have not yet been vaccinated. And there is a very high rate of Delta variant. Nevertheless, the fatality rate is standing at a very low level. In South Korea, it is very positive that we do not have a high increase of the Delta variant, and we also have seen a slight decrease in the amount of foot traffic by our public, and we are also seeing contained low level of fatality. However, we cannot stay complacent at this moment because nationwide, including the capital region as well as other regions, we are seeing continued spread, and the entire the total infection size is bigger than the previous 3 waves, having 4-digit numbers on a daily basis. And we also have possible infection risks among the high-risk group as well. So until we have a clear downturn in the daily cases, we need to be particularly careful of a possible outbreak. And we need to also think about the patients that are needed to be endured, because there are many people who are still fighting on the front lines. And also there are many self-employed and small business owners who are embracing and who are also going through such difficulties. And we believe that it is also painful for individuals to continue to comply with these measures. However, once again, we ask you to continue to comply with these measures going forward. The quarantine government authorities will also continue to exert our full efforts to this end. Thank you very much.
Right, that was Kwon Jinuk with Friday's afternoon briefing. So what did he have to say?
Let's begin with the updates on the vaccination reservation for those in their 50s, which will continue until tomorrow, 6 p.m., so Saturday, 6 p.m. Korea time. And so far, 80.9% of those aged in their 50s have completed their reservation. And the actual reservation for those in that age group will begin on the 26th of July until the 31st for those aged 55 to 59. And Kwon mentioned that due to reasons related to the supply of vaccinations, those in the capital region in that age group will receive Pfizer vaccination, and outside the capital region, Moderna vaccination. And there's been also a change in the time frame of when to receive the second shot, as that's usually 3 weeks for Pfizer and 4 weeks for Moderna. But considering factors like vaccination supply and personal reasons, as well as reasons of medical facilities, this span has been extended to 6 weeks past the first shot. He also mentioned that a task force at the Tokyo Olympics is running 24 hours monitoring the virus situation there and also making sure that our athletes are safe.
Right, well, that's good to know. All right, so thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Japanese people can have confidence in all the efforts we are undertaking to make these games for them secure and safe, with all the intensive, most strict COVID countermeasures.
The 2020 Summer Olympics officially begin on this Friday amid much anxiety and anticipation as the Games this time around share their stage with a pandemic no less. Now for more on this, I have Dr. DavidKwak from Suncheon University Hospital. Welcome back, Dr. Kwak.
Good afternoon.
And joining the session virtually is Professor Ken Ishii at the University of Tokyo. Pleasure to have you with us, Professor Ishii.
Great to meet you. Nice.
I also have Yuji Ho at Yonhap News Agency, who is currently in Japan with us live as well. Good to see you again, Chio.
Thanks for having me today.
Right, Chio, curtains are going up for the Tokyo Olympics on this Friday evening. Let's start with the overall atmosphere in Japan. And how is Team Korea feeling to be finally there in Japan for the 2020 Summer Games?
Right, the opening ceremony will begin at 8 p.m. tonight, but I'm probably not the right person to maybe talking about the atmosphere surrounding the game because I've been quarantining in my hotel for the past 3 days. But I will say this, I don't think this is even a particularly popular Olympics. You see the poll numbers, indicating the vast majority of Japanese people are actually opposed to the idea of hosting the Olympics on their home soil during the global pandemic. There have been scandals involving members of creative team for the ceremonies. 3 people within the last few months have either stepped down or have been dismissed because of some, past misconduct. The government also facing criticism for putting the Olympics seemingly ahead of their public health concerns as the number of COVID-19 cases continues to rise. Now, with the Korean delegation, I think the athletes, for the most part, have been putting on a brave face, saying the right things, and I guess doing the right things as well. They're following those rules and try to not to, one, not to get infected with COVID-19, and two, not affect those around them by, getting the virus. So, the clock is ticking is almost here. I guess the 8-year itch for Tokyo and the rest of the Olympic community is just about over.
Right. And Dr. Kwak, there are concerns that the Games may turn into a super spreader event. What are your thoughts on these concerns?
Well, obviously, I would dearly hope that that won't turn into a cluster infection. And I think the chances actually is quite low that it might actually turn into a cluster infection event because, as we have seen from the measures that the Japanese government is currently taking, they're having rather very strict control over, trying their best to really minimize even the possible chances. One thing I've noticed is that I've checked, I've been giving PCR tests to a lot of the people who are going to Japan or Japan Olympics for their participation, and I had to give them 2 different sets of PCR tests on 2 different dates. And it seems like for the people who are arriving from more dangerous countries or countries having higher numbers of the cases are being tested once they arrive for 7 straight days as well. So it seems like they're trying to do their best to really minimize any chances possible, but the chances are still there as much as we have it here. So we still have to, all we can do is really have our fingers crossed and hope for the best, but I'm hoping for the best for it to go safely and for the whole event to succeed for the whole global community.
Right. And Professor Ishii, what are your thoughts then on the hosting of the Olympics amid a global resurgence?
Yes, as an expert on health, on public health, I'm almost in agreement with Dr. Kwak, 100% that we have no way to go back to cancel the Olympic, suggesting that we got to be on the alert, doing as much as possible, or measuring the infections, detecting the infection, as well as also conducting this vaccine rollout independently of this Olympic game for the people who are around the Olympics, but also it is unfortunate that we didn't have everybody vaccinate, for the athlete and relevant people. However, the medical situation in Japan are still capable of holding this Olympic in terms of this, having the patients as well as taking care of the severe patient as well.
Dr. Ishii, the state of emergency declared in Tokyo appears to be doing little to contain the outbreak there. How do you explain this reality?
It is hard to explain it, but the problem in Japan is to have this vaccine rollout has been so slow, so that we don't have any ability for the this people to join this match. But so far it is fine, I guess.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
Meanwhile, Chiho, tell us a bit about the entry protocols into Japan for the Olympics. I hear you went through some very stern set of protocols.
Right. It was a long journey. The flight itself from Korea to Tokyo was only about 2 hours. But after that, I had to get tested for COVID-19, despite the fact that I was tested twice within the 96 hours of my departure from Korea. And I had to wait for the result to get the clearance to leave the airport. So that took about 3.5, 4 hours. And also, we're not allowed to take any public transit for the first 14 days of our stay. So we had to wait for our designated vehicles to get us into a city center, and then take another designated vehicle to get to our hotel. When everything's said and done, it took about, I think, 7 hours from the moment of landing at the airport to get to our accommodation. So, it was a long trip, but this is a part of the new normal, I guess, to try to have the Olympics during a pandemic for the first time. We had to be separated from the passengers that are not related to the Olympics on our way out of the airplane. Again, the long wait came up later. So even after my quarantine ends tomorrow, I will not be allowed to just roam around the city. Before we traveled, we had to submit a list of places that we're supposed to go or plan to go. And we had to get that approved by the Japanese government in order to actually get the customs cleared. And that list pretty much includes only our stay of accommodation, competition venues, and the media center, and that's pretty much it. So it is kind of a bubble, if you will. I guess the goal is to try to minimize context between different people as much as possible.
Right. And as Chio mentioned, Dr. Kwak, Olympic organizers in Japan have adopted that as a bubble strategy to protect the public there and Olympic-related personnel. Could you tell us a bit more about the bubble strategy, and perhaps how does it compare to the earlier strategy adopted by the U.S. National Basketball Association?
So bubble is a concept which is not entirely new to our conception. We've seen this, we mentioned even a year back when we were discussing to have travel bubbles to, let's say, Singapore or Thailand, travel bubbles between each two countries where people will be isolated in a certain place at a designated travel site so that they won't come into contact with the local people. As you mentioned, it has been taken place by the NBA, the National Basketball Association in the United States last year for the last season. What they did was they isolated a huge chunk of geographical area and only allowed athletes and obviously basketball players and all the related people to reside on that soil only. And they minimized any chances for them to actually go outside to minimize any possibilities that they could catch COVID-19 from other people. Through that, they had 0 cases of COVID-19 happening during that season, even if they played hundreds or more games during the season. Japan is also attempting to implement such idea into the Olympics. So they're trying to minimize any possible physical contact between local residents and the athletes and the related people in order to minimize the possibility of transmission. Now, that being said, it seems like Tokyo has taken a step further and banned actually from spectators to come into the sports games and would allow local governments to decide on their own games. I think that's not such a bad idea because it'll still also minimize the possibility of transmission among people who are inside one space. But we have to think about this. NBA is rather a private sector type of association. So it can be invested millions of billions of money by these private companies. Obviously, Olympics is another huge festival that all these private sectors come in to invest their own money as well. But it's also a global festival, meaning we have to have, let's say, people cheer for their own countries. Have these games for their own countries. It's not exactly the same situation as what NBA used to have. So even though I'm still cheering for whatever is happening currently, but we have to sort of balance about the extent of how much social distancing we will keep within the game versus how much fun we will have also during the game. I'm not exactly saying that we should ease this distancing guideline, though.
Of course not. Professor Ishii, now, despite efforts by authorities there to contain the outbreak, at least 106 individuals related to the Olympics tested positive for COVID-19 ahead of the opening ceremony on this Friday. Do you suppose the strategy adopted by authorities there should be strengthened or perhaps revised?
I don't think it should be revised. However, I mean, it's been already too late to have no COVID cases in even the Tokyo Olympic Game College, so that some of the teams in the country have already evacuated to the hotel, so that the bubble tactics has been already broken in a way that we should be struggling to minimize at least having clusters and to also to affect at least the games of the Rio Olympics.
Right. Dr. Kwak, there is talk about the lack of information regarding transmission routes following cases of infections amid privacy concerns. What potential problems does this pose?
Well, the potential problems that it would pose is the lack of information would allow other people the possible chances of being exposed to the virus. But if we reflect on ourselves, we also do not let those personal information be known to others while there is transmission of the virus among our local communities. I am very kind of torn about this specific issue because in my mind as a medical doctor, I think it should all be known to everyone who's around it, not to blame on the person who's infected, but rather so that the people around them can be more careful and not do their best not to catch the virus. But also at the same time, I do value personal information, and I think all the individuals who are infected are victims of the virus, not the spreaders of the, well, they are possibly spreading, but they're still also victims of the virus. So their personal information and their rights should be protected. So let me just leave it at that. I want to stay neutral in the sense that the information still should be kept private while having all people that are around them be isolated from the virus as well.
Right. And having said that, Chio, what measures are in place to better protect the players, and do include those measures for Team Korea as well, Chio?
Yeah, athletes have to follow the same set of protocols. Everybody's doing their best they can to try to stay healthy and try to keep this on going. They're going to be tested on a daily basis. Mentioned the athletes having to pick up their own medals themselves and put it around their own necks during the medal ceremonies. And you're not going to see a lot of pictures with medalists, hugging each other, congratulating each other after winning the medals. And you're not going to see athletes biting their medals for the photos. So it's going to be a different Olympics on so many different levels. Not a lot of hugging, not a lot of physical contact among the athletes. Yesterday after a South Korean team's men's football match, one of the Korean players was criticized heavily for refusing to shake hands with an opponent player from New Zealand. Maybe he was upset that the team had lost, but at the same time, maybe he was respecting the social the distancing guidelines, which specifically state that athletes should not shake hands as much as possible. So again, this is a very different Olympics. This is very new for everybody involved, and I think they have to understand that there are rules to be followed in order to make this a safe and healthy Olympics.
Right, it is unprecedented. Professor Ishii, under current Olympic guidelines for team sports, those who come into contact with infected people are allowed to play if they test negative 6 hours before their match. What are your thoughts on the wisdom of this regulation?
I mean, scientifically, it is minimally reasonable, I should say. Although there may be an ideal way, a better way if you think of, but so far, I think the 6 hours is still reasonable for PCR tests. But the importance is to have these, suspicious athletes to be continuously, monitored. In addition to the monitoring the other, contacts. Otherwise, there's no perfect way to make it into the zero. So far, I think it's okay to have this rule.
Right. And too, as you mentioned, Team Korea had a football match on Thursday and its archers are playing on this Friday. Could you tell us more about them?
Sure. Well, I touched upon, I guess, the result of the football match yesterday. Korea losing to New Zealand 1-0 to open group stage. Not a great start, but still 2 matches to go in the group stage and for them to finish in the top 2 in the group and advance to the quarterfinals. With the archery, there was a ranking round for women's side earlier this morning today, and the men's ranking round is going on as we speak. In the women's event, Ain San from South Korea set an Olympic record with 680 points in the ranking round, finishing first. And 2 of her teammates, Jang Min-hee and Kang Chae-young, finished second and third, so rounding out the top 3 from the Team Korea. And also their combined score of 2,032 points, another Olympic record. So setting 2 Olympic records on the first day of the ranking round. And for tomorrow, Ain San will represent South Korea in the brand new mixed team event in archery. So she's got a chance to win 3 archery gold medals in a single Olympics for the first time in history. And as I said, men's ranking round going on as we speak, and we've got 3 archers at the top, Kim Jae-deok, Kim Woo-jin, and Oh Jin-hyuk, vying for first place in their round as well.
Right, a good start then. Dr. Kwak, some 15,000 athletes take part in 33 sporting events over a period of 17 days. What are your words of advice for a safe and secure Summer Olympics?
Well, I'm going to go back to what I used to say originally. Obviously, keeping the 3 W's, wash your hands, watch the distance, and always wear your mask. But obviously, with the athletes competing, they will not be able to wear the mask, but at least keep the distances. And also be aware that it is always possible for the virus to transmit anywhere. So I guess for those people who are currently in Japan, they should do their best to still minimize transmission individually. But let alone the government's taking place in it. I was kind of hoping that maybe if at all possible, since this is a global community festival, either WHO or the Olympics Committee can step in and maybe inoculate the athletes who are not currently vaccinated with Moderna or Pfizer or AstraZeneca or whatever the types of COVID-19 vaccine there might be, so that the athletes and the people who are related to the game would also be vaccinated during the game as well.
Right. Professor Ishii, what are your thoughts on ensuring a successful event amid the pandemic?
Sure. I mean, on behalf of the Japanese citizen and government, I would like to apologize for this, the mess in the disorganized preparation for Olympics. But I also would like you to understand that we are in the middle of the 2 biggest, the campaign of not only the vaccination to the national, nationwide, but also we are going to hold the biggest sports event, trying to do our best. Just like you said, 50,000 athletes with people with the 33 in 40 different places at the same time in 17 days in the middle of this summer, very hot. I'd like everybody, including Mr. Jeho, out of this quarantine, to enjoy at least the biggest sports event in the world. Thank you.
Of course, Professor Ishii, you have the support of the world. Chio, let's end with a few words then on the significance of the 2020 Summer Olympics.
Yeah, I think the fact that they're just going ahead with this during the pandemic I think it has generated a lot of conflicting emotions from people that are involved, including, I think, people of Japan. I talked about the criticism that the organizers have faced for going ahead with it, but at the same time, sports can be a nice distraction from all the troubles over the world. I think sports have served that kind of role in other times, and I think here's hoping that it will serve a similar purpose during the global pandemic this year.
Right. All right, Chio, thank you for your words. Professor Ishii, thank you very much for joining us live with your thoughts at this hour. And Dr. Kwak here in the studio, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Right, now starting today until the 8th of August, Team Korea and their global counterparts are partaking in an unprecedented Summer Olympics. Now we send them our prayers and wishes for a safe and rewarding event. Have a good weekend. See you on Monday.